Hi everyone, viewer discretion is advised during this film today because there is graphic content description of some of the murders that happened with the Moorsmurders. So please be advised of that. Also today's video, I'm working as a collaboration with Lee, The Aqua Adventurer. So you will see and hear Lee within the video itself. So don't be surprised and you're thinking, who's that? He's a fellow YouTuber, he's a good friend of mine and he's got some good knowledge on this case. So I brought him on board just to help me out a little bit, because it's quite a big one and I wanted to bring in the best way that I could for you guys as well. Hi, it's Paul here from Unusual Things, and today I'm standing on Saddleworth Moor. Such a beautiful location, but with such a dark history behind it. Myrahindley, Ianbrady brought their victims to Saddleworth Moor and murdered them. Today we're going to go find the final resting places of some of those victims, but we do know one thing. One of the children hasn't got a final resting place. Keith Bennett is believed, and I state believed because no one is 100% sure, to be within that triangle mound behind me. And again, I'm only speculating of what I've heard and what I've read on the research. So I'm not saying he's definitely there, but we all have to keep an open mind. That's a high probability as to where he could be. There's a monument which I'll be showing you of Keith, with some lovely teddies and photos that people have left for him, which is very nearby, and I'll be showing you that today, as well as all the other final resting places of the victims of Myrahindley and Ianbrady. The Moorsmurders were carried out by Ianbrady and Myrahindley between July 1963 and October 1965 in and around Manchester, England. The victims were 5 children: Pauline Reade, John Kilbride, Keith Bennett, Lesley and Downey and Edward Evans, aged between 10 and 17, at least 4 of whom were sexually assaulted. The bodies of 2 of the victims were discovered in 1965 in graves dug on Saddleworth Moor. A third grave was discovered there in 1987, more than 20 years after Brady and Hindley's trial. Keith Bennett's body is also thought to be buried there, but despite repeated searches, it remains undiscovered. The pair were charged only for the murders of Kilbride, Downey and Evans, and received life sentences under a whole life tariff. The investigation was reopened in 1985 after Brady was reported as having confessed to the murders of Reade and Bennett. After confessing these additional murders, Brady and Hindley were taken separately to Saddleworth Moor to assist in the searches of the graves. Characterised by the press as the most evil woman in Britain, Hindley made several appeals against her life sentence, claiming she was a reformed woman and no longer a danger to society, but was also never released. She died in 2002, aged 60, after serving 36 years in prison. Brady was diagnosed as a psychopath in 1985 and confined to the high-security Ashworth Hospital. He made it clear he never wished to be released and repeatedly asked to be allowed to die. He died in 2017 at Ashworth, aged 79. So that's some information there on what happened with the Moorsmurders. Now, I haven't gone into too much depth regarding Hindley and Brady, and the reason this isn't about them. Okay, this is just to show some respect towards their victims, to find the final resting places of the ones that had their bodies found. And as I said earlier on, sadly we can't do that for Keith Bennett. And his mum passed away, Winnie, not too long ago, and sadly never got to find out what happened to her son. But we do know that she used to come here a lot and look out over these grounds here, the area in which they believe, and as I stated before, they believe Keith to be. As we continue on our journey to visit the graves of the victims of the Moorsmurder, we're now looking for Pauline Reade. On the 12th of July 1963, Brady told Hindley that he wanted to commit the perfect murder. After work, he instructed her to drive a borrowed van around while he followed on his motorcycle. When he spotted a likely victim, he would flash his headlight. Driving down Gorton Lane, Brady saw a young girl and signalled to Hindley, who did not stop because she recognised the young 8-year-old neighbour. Sometime after 7:30 p.m. on Froxmore Street, Brady signalled Hindley to stop for 16-year-old Pauline Reade, a schoolmate of Hindley's sister. Hindley offered Reade a lift. Once Pauline was in the van, Hindley asked her to help in searching Saddleworth Moor for an expensive lost glove. Pauline agreed and they drove there. When Brady arrived on his motorcycle, Hindley told Pauline he would be helping in the search. Hindley later claimed that she waited in the van while Brady took Pauline onto the moor. Brady returned alone after about 30 minutes and took Hindley to the spot where Reade lay dying. Her clothes were in disarray and she had been nearly decapitated by 2 cuts to her throat, including a 4-inch incision across her voice box, inflicted with considerable force, and into which the collar of her coat and throat chain had been pushed. When Hindley asked Brady whether he had raped Pauline, he replied, "Of course I did." Hindley stayed with her while Brady retrieved the spade he had hidden nearby on a previous visit, then returned to the van while Brady buried Pauline. In Brady's account, Hindley was not present for the attack but participated in the sexual assault. In memory of Pauline Reade, died the 12th of July 1963, aged 16 years. Amos Reade, died the 23rd of November 1995, aged 69 years. Joan Reade, died the 30th of May 2000, aged 72 years. Paul Amos Reade, died April of 2004, aged 56 years. Dearly loved, sadly missed. It's so sad, like I said earlier, when you actually read these graves and you know how they come to a horrible, vicious, nasty end. And, you know, you want to pay your respects to these poor people that just went through so much. So, bless you, Pauline, and I hope wherever you are now that you're in a lot better place and just looked after. Okay, so I've now come to Hurst Cemetery to continue to look for the Moors murder victims, and we're looking out for John Kilbride. Okay, so I will give you a bit more information on John. In the early evening of 23rd of November 1963, at a market in Ashton-under-Lyne, Brady and Hindley offered 12-year-old John Kilbride a lift home, saying his parents might worry that he was out so late. They also promised him a bottle of sherry. Once Kilbride was inside Hindley's hired Ford Anglia car, Brady said they would have to make a detour to their home for the sherry. When they reached the moor, Brady took Kilbride with him while Hindley waited in the car. Brady sexually assaulted Kilbride and tried to slit his throat with a 6-inch serrated blade before strangling him with a shoelace or shoestring. So there's the information there on John Kilbride. Another life taken so young, so pointless in taking an innocent kid's life. Words just escape me. I don't really know what to say, to be honest with you. The more I look into this, the more I think how disgusting they were, how vile they were, how inhumane they were, and just, there's no word for them, is there really? When you look into it, and this is the first time I've really looked into it quite deeply, and I've tried to do this out of respect for the victims and try not to mention them, but the whole story revolves around what they did to make these poor people victims. Kilbride, in memory of John, eldest child of Sheila and Patrick, missing November 1963, buried November 1965. Aged 12 years old, at rest with God. Also Patrick Daniel, a dear dad, granddad and husband, born the 1st of July 1929, died the 3rd of May 1999. Sheila, Mary, Mum, Granny and great, I won't move it, but probably great Nan or something, April 1932, died 27th July 2002. So there's the grave of John Kilbride. You know, 12 years old, we can't fathom it, can we? And what must any parent or family member or friend go through when you hear such devastating news? And it's lovely to see that obviously his place is looked after, and obviously the people around him still love and care for him. Bless you, John. Early in the evening of the 16th of June 1964, Hindley asked 12-year-old Keith Bennett, who was on his way to his grandma's house in Longside, for help in loading some boxes into her mini pickup, after which she said she would drive him home. Brady was in the back of the van. Hindley drove to a lay-by on Saddleworth Moor and Brady went off with Bennett. After about 30 minutes, Brady returned alone carrying a spade that he had hidden there earlier, and in response to Hindley's questions said that he had sexually assaulted Bennett and strangled him with a piece of string. So this is the small memorial that's left here for Keith Bennett that I was talking about, with some photos, some teddies and some tributes. Now before you watch this next clip, I just want to state one thing. There's no audio on it, so I have had to do a voiceover over the top. Now the reason is, whilst Lee and I were standing outside the address filming, we played back the content 2 or 3 times. We recorded it a couple of times and it was fine. The picture quality was fine, the sound quality was fine, but there was a real eerie atmosphere outside of this location. It didn't feel good at all. And for some reason, when I went to play back the audio for editing reason, there was no audio there whatsoever. I played it on my device, we played it on Lee's device. Very strange indeed. However, we know technical issues do happen, but it just felt very strange outside that house, and it's just weird that the audio and the video were just a little bit cranky. Here's the clip now. I'm stood outside what used to be 16 Waldlebrook Avenue, a 2-bedroom council house in Hyde near Manchester. This is the location where a 10-year-old Lesley Downey was strangled at the house where Hindley lived with her grandmother. But before they killed her, the twisted pair taped themselves abusing and torturing the terrified little girl as she pleaded pitifully for her mum. The sickening 16-minute recording was later played at the trial of the murderers. Edward Evans, who was 17, was also killed in the house when Brady hit him 14 times with a hatchet before strangling him. David, who was Hindley's brother-in-law, who died in 2012, witnessed the murder of Edward and phoned the police the following morning, finally bringing the killings to an end.
After the arrest of Brady, 4 days later, Myrahindley was also arrested and taken into custody. They then began a thorough search of 16 Wardlebrook Avenue. It was here that things was about to get a lot worse and unfold. The police found a ticket hidden within one of Brady's books. This ticket was for the lost luggage compartment at Manchester train station. The police went there and checked. There was hidden luggage that Brady had put there because he didn't want the police to discover them and learn what they was onto. In this luggage was graphic photographs, a tape recording that we all know about. Also in here was a piece of paper with the name on it, John Kilbride. From here it became apparent that the police was onto something a lot greater than just the murder of Edward Evans. They studied the photographs hard. They even went to the local farmer and asked if he could identify these photographs. It was from here that the farmer led them to where these photographs were taken. This then became the discovery after searching of 2 bodies, Lesley and Downey and John Kilbride. Lesley and Downey was buried one side of the road, and on this side of the road is where they discovered John Kilbride 5 days later. After the police had discovered the bodies of Lesley and Downey and John Kilbride, they continued to search for 1 more month. After that month, they called it off. They was unable to find anybody else. It wouldn't be till 2 decades later that a journalist, after hearing that more children went missing around the same time, decided to look into it a little bit further. He decided to write to Brady. Not once, but on numerous occasions. He gained Brady's trust just a little bit. He then pushed it that bit further and asked him for a meet-up. Brady agreed. At this time, Hindley was thinking she was due for a parole hearing. Brady gets wind of this and decides to turn his back on Hindley. He wants her to stay behind bars. He knows for a fact he's going nowhere and he doesn't want her out. So he decides to confess to the journalist that there's more children on the moors. Hindley gets wind of this, and of course she decides to confess as well. She says there is more children out there. I wasn't part of the actual murders themselves, but I'll help you. I'll take you and we'll look for them, and I'll give you clues to where these people are. She thinks by doing so she is going to get sympathised with, and she will get parole and eventually end up outside. After Brady's indirect confession, a public outcry happened and the investigation was opened back up. And in charge of this investigation was Peter Toppings. He was going to be the lead investigator. Hindley also decided that she was going to come forward and give the police investigator the best help possible, and she did. She drew maps and she also went on a visit to the moors to point out places of interest that she could remember where her and Brady led the children, or where she thought she led the children. It wouldn't be long after some numerous searching and hours spent on the moors that they would discover another body not far from where Hindley pointed out. That would be the body of Pauline Reade. After numerous attempts at finding Keith Bennett, it wasn't to be, and the search was called off. Winnie Bennett, Keith's mum, pledged that she would never ever give up searching for Keith.
I will never give up, never in a month of Sunday. If it takes me to my grave, I'll carry on till then.
Brady and Hindley visited a fun fair in Annakitts on the 26th of December 1964 and noticed that 10-year-old Lesley Downey was apparently alone. They approached her and deliberately dropped some shopping they were carrying, then asked her for help in taking the packages back to their car and then on to Wardle Brook Avenue. At the house, Downey was undressed, gagged and forcibly posed for photographs before being raped and killed, perhaps strangled with a piece of string. Hindley later maintained that she went to fill a bath for Downey and found her dead when she returned. Brady claimed that Hindley killed Downey. The following morning, Brady and Hindley drove Downey's body to Saddleworth Moor and buried her naked with her clothes at her feet in a shallow grave. In loving memory of our darling Lesley Ann, beloved daughter of Anne and Alan, died 26 December 1964, aged 10 years. Also baby Scott, died 5 months old. Also loving mum and nana of above, Anne, died the 9th of February 1999, aged 69 years. A loving wife who will be sadly missed by all her family. And then down the bottom, tiny roses, Lent not given, to bud on earth and bloom in heaven. And obviously, the family still come and look after Lesley's final resting spot. So there's all the information there on Lesley Downey. You know, none of us can begin to explain what her poor family went through and what she went through, more importantly, by the hands of these evil people. And like I said, I'm not going to say their name again at the moment. They don't deserve it. And we all know where they should be, and we all hope where they should be. And we hope that this young poor lady is in the complete opposite place to them, being looked after and being spoilt rotten like she should have been on this earth. Bless you, Lesley. On the evening of the 6th of October 1965, Hindley drove Brady to Manchester Central Railway Station, where she waited outside in the car whilst he selected a victim. After a few minutes, Brady reappeared in the company of 17-year-old Edward Evans, an apprentice engineer who lived in Ardwick, to whom he introduced Hindley and as his sister. Brady later claimed that he had picked up Evans for a sexual encounter. They drove to Brady and Hindley's home in Wardle Brook Avenue, when they relaxed over a bottle of wine. At some point, Brady sent Hindley to fetch Smith, her brother-in-law. Hindley's family had not approved of Maureen's marriage to Smith, who had several criminal convictions, including actual bodily harm and housebreaking, the first of which, wounding with intent, occurred when he was 11. Throughout the previous year, Brady had been cultivating a friendship with Smith, who had become in awe of Brady, something that was increasingly worried Hindley, as she felt compromised from their safety. Hindley returned with Smith and told him to wait outside for her signal, a flashing light, and when the signal came, Smith knocked on the door and was met by Brady, who asked if he had come for the miniature wine bottles and left him in the kitchen, saying that he was going to collect the wine. Smith later told the police. I waited about a minute or two, then suddenly I heard the hell of a scream. It sounded like a woman with a really high-pitched voice. Then the screams carry on, one after another, really loud. Then I heard Myra shout, "Dave, help him," very loud. When I ran in, I just stood inside the living room and I saw a young lad. He was lying with his head and shoulders on the couch and his legs were on the floor. He was facing upwards and Ian was standing over him, with his legs either side of the young lad's legs. The lad was still screaming and Ian had a hatchet in his hand. He was holding it above his head and he hit the lad on the left-hand side of the head with the hatchet. I heard the blow, it was terrible. A hard blow, it sounded horrible. Smith then watched Brady throttle Evans with a length of electrical cord. Brady sprained his ankle in the struggle, and Evans' body was too heavy for Smith to carry to the car on his home. So they wrapped it up in plastic sheeting and put it in the spare bedroom. In loving memory of Edward Evans, loving son of Edith and John Edward Evans, died the 6th of October 1965, aged 17 years. John Edward Evans, loving husband of Edith, loving father of Edith, Edward and Alan, died August the 17th, 1967, aged 57 years. Edith Evans died September the 20th, 2007, aged 86 years, loving wife of John Edward and mother of Edith, Edward and Alan. Cherish Nana and great Nana, love you always, forget you never. So there we have it, that's the grave there of Edward Evans, and I've got to say, bless you and bless your family, because what they went through, him being taken at 17 years old and then his father 2 years later at 57, I don't know the outcome of that. I don't know whether it was stress related or whether there was an accident or whether he just died of natural causes. And then his mum lived on until 86 years, having that throughout her whole life, losing her son to those awful conditions, and then losing her husband 2 years later. Terrible time for that family. Again, that's all done by these two monsters. Yet again, we hear about how torturous, evil, vile, psychotic and crazy these two were. You know, Edward Evans, 17 years old. His whole life ahead of him, the same as all the other victims. And now he can't be let to just live his life, can he? Because the two monsters decided that wasn't going to be the case. So there we have it, guys. That's all the information there on the Moorsmurders. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for Lee for all of his input today in helping me make this video. And thank you most importantly to you for watching. And our deepest condolences and respect go out to all the families involved in those heinous crimes. And I will see you all on the next one. Take it easy.